and his sacrifices. We would like to commence today's program with prayer. So I'd like to invite Sayyid Rasool to the podium for Tilawat-e-Quran.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت وإذا البحار سجرت وإذا النفوس زوجت وإذا الموءودة سئلت بأي ذنب قتلت. وإذا الصحف نشرت وإذا السماء كشطت وإذا الجحيم سعرت وإذا الجنة أزلفت علمت نفس ما أحضرت. فلا أقسم بالخنس الجوار الكنس والليل إذا عسعس والصبح إذا تنفس إنه لقول رسول كريم. ذي قوة عند ذي العرش مكين مطاع ثم أمين. وما صاحبكم بمجنون ولقد رآه بالأفق المبين وما هو على الغيب بضنين وما هو بقول شيطان رجيم فأين تذهبون إن هو إلا ذكر للعالمين لمن شاء منكم أن يستقيم وما تشاءون إلا أن يشاء الله رب العالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع الإخلاص والصلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you for that beautiful recitation. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to invite our respected speakers to come up here and sit on the table over here. We have Dr. Rizwan Zamir, Dr. Diane D'Souza, Dr. Hasnan Walji, and Sheikh Fadil Al-Salami. I would now like to introduce the president of this year's program for his welcome address. He is a retired project manager from General Electric and is very actively involved in the community. Along with his religious activities, he is an avid lover of Urdu poetry as it pertains to the Ahlul Bayt. You all know him as Sayyid Bakr Rizvi. I know him as Daddy. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and most merciful, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. By the grace of Allah, this is the 35th year of Imam Husain Day being commemorated in North America. Thanks to God, each and every year, Husain Day has been a great success with a strong and diverse background of his speakers from various sectors that comprises of scholars, professionals, theologians, thinkers, politicians, and others. Husain Day is organized and commemorated to create awareness of freedom of speech, to convey the true message of Islam through Imam Husain's overall mission of peace, justice, human rights, and freedom. Imam Husain al-Islam of martyrdom provides a vision and guidance for the oppressed to stand up and raise their voices for their rights. Imam Husain al-Islam is the savior of Islam and flag bearer of justice, peace, freedom, human rights, and above all, La ilaha illallah. Imam Husain is the figure and symbol that belongs to all communities. Like others great leaders and saints of the world from different walks of life and religions, who have paved the way towards certain motivating missions in life. However, Imam Husain al-Islam is the everlasting model of freedom, peace, and justice. He is inspiration to all when confronting oppression, terrorism, and hate. As Josh Abadi, poet from the East, has said, कब सिर्फ मुसलमान के प्यारे हैं हुसैन, कब सिर्फ मुसलमान के प्यारे हैं हुसैन, चरखे नौए बशर के तारे हैं हुसैन, इंसान को बेदार तो हो लेने दो, हर कौम पुकारेगी हमारे हैं हुसैन. In short, Imam Husain is not just for Muslims, but for the whole mankind. He is a star from the sky. His light is for everyone. Once the humanity is well aware of his sacrifice and mission, everyone will be saying, Husain is mine. Today, Islam is hijacked by so-called Muslim Khalifas and Taliban and ISIS, who abuse the peaceful religion of Islam by making it mockery of civilization and humanity. Real Muslims must understand the real message of Karbala and implement it in our lives. We should share the powerful message and inspiration to outside world. Imam Husain is a beacon of hope for those who are oppressed, pained, and freedomless. Imam Husain's message to everyone to stand up for their rights, freedom, beliefs, and principle of human beings. Ladies and gentlemen, one important note is that the views and opinions expressed by our respected speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Husain Day Organization Committees or its members. In conclusion, I, on behalf of Islamic Day Celebration Council, Muslim Foundation Inc., and Husain Day Organization Committee, welcome each and every one of you with peace, respect to this vital convention of Imam Husain Day. I am honored that all of you have graced this event with your presence and participation in honor of Imam Husain alayhi salam. I am confident that such open dialogues will go a long way to create a serene and moral atmosphere for the sake of our future generation. I am thankful to Husain Day Organization Committee, Vice Presidents, Chief Patron, Secretary, Treasurer, and Executive members, in particular, Zain Naqvi, Zahra Rizvi, Zain Rizvi, Zaki Rizvi, and Dr. Zafar Abbas Jafri, for the support and cooperation and coordination in making this Husain Day 2014 a very successful event. May Allah, Ahlul Bayt, bless you all. Wassalam. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful welcome. MashaAllah, our generation is seeing an influx of creative minds who have innovatively expressed their love for Imam Husain in a way that speaks to more than just our community. Next, I would like to introduce Sayyid Zamzam Ali Al-Makki, a young member of our community, to recite poetry. Please welcome him with a loud salawat.
Thank you, Sister Zahra. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This following poem revolves around the theme of a famous hadith of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Husainu minni wa ana min Husain, which itself tells volumes of Islam's history. In this poem, I'm going to make a couple references to some key historical figures who learned from Imam Husain, and thereby changing the direction of human history and benefits that we are enjoying today from the sacrifice of Husain. Bismillah. Husainu minni wa ana min Husain, said the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Husainu minni wa ana min Husain. Husain is from me and I am from Husain. We see from the Prophet is the grandson Husain, but from the grandson is the Prophet. What could he mean? Read about Karbala if your heart can stand, where thirsty stood the grandson protecting the deen. Whereupon the family of God's Prophet for 3 days water was denied, yet Husain stayed brave so that La ilaha survived. For not much time had elapsed since the Rasul had departed, when his message faced attack from another tyrant, cold-hearted. Jibreel never brought a revelation. To gain power, Islam was Bani Hashim's innovation, was the claim of abomination of Yazid, though first was he not. predecessors had he in companions who openly doubted the prophethood of the Nabi. But in Karbala would be exposed this hijacking of religion and would be invigorated Islam for eternity. For at stake was the Quran. At stake was the Salat and Azan. At stake was the message of all of God's prophets from Adam to Huzur sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To safeguard this message for humanity complete, to show in the face of injustice we will not yield. Truth was searching. Truth itself was searching for a soul, for an incredible feat, who would plant a garden of lessons in a desert field. Raised in the house of Fatima would be that scion. Husain ibn Ali was the name of the lion, said the grandson of Nabi, for a man like me to give allegiance to a man like Yazid, this will never be. Better than such a life would death with honor be. Armed with truth, faith, and pride, and with a sister like Zainab by his side, and with a sister like Zainab by his side. If Husain saved Islam in Karbala, Zainab saved Husain minni wa ana min Husain. She showed how to say Husain ya Husain, Husain ya Husain. The yoke of colonialism had under its rule many lands around the globe. When a man named Gandhi read the story, grandson of Rasul, and began his first march with 72 souls. Said the great sage, I learned from Husain how to achieve, while being oppressed, victory. He was just one ray of the light of Shabir, that the oppressed of the day found the courage to rise. For Karbala would illuminate both East and West Hemisphere to America, where racial injustice is destined for demise. I have a dream, declared Dr. King. From Mahatma, the young reverend found his inspiration, the inspiration that flew with Imam Husain's wings. For a tear is an intellectual thing, which awoke the conscience of this and many nations. The flag of human rights today is truly a legacy of the soul who gave it all. Husain is Shaheed Nafsul Mutmain. Husain minni wa ana min Husain. He showed what's within me and for what I should stand. The azan of Ali Akbar, the morning of Ashur. It's the echoes of that azan from China to Santa Cruz. Next time you hear the azan, think of your prophet's family standing as prisoners in Sham, tied in chains like cattle. When Yazid asked Sajjad who won the battle, said my Imam, your answer is in the azan. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulallah. Whose grandfather was Muhammad? He said, Husain minni wa ana min Husain. Today, 1.5 billion Muslims from Uzbekistan to Hong Kong and beyond say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulallah. My salams to my Imam in Sham. My salams to my Imam in Sham. Husain minni wa ana min Husain. Saved was truth on Karbala's sands. In Karbala's desert lies humanity's treasure. For Mazloom Husain belongs to the world. His religion is humanity. His soul is the hope for the oppressed and the weak. If you are with truth, you will always succeed, is the universal creed. Husain minni wa ana min Husain. Haqqaqibuna ila ilaha ast Husain. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for Husain Day for putting this wonderful event together. And one day, inshallah, the name of Husain will be known all around the world. And like Dr. Rizvi said before me, दुनिया को बेजार होने दो, हर कौम पुकारेगी, हुसैन हमारे हैं. Salawat.
Thank you, Brother Zamzam, for sharing your creativity with us. Our next speaker is the Professor of Islamic Studies at Davidson College in North Carolina. He received his bachelor's from both the University of Punjab and James Madison University. He earned his PhD from the University of Virginia. His research includes areas of Shia thought and spirituality, Sufi metaphysics, ethics within the Islamic intellectual context, and Islamic philosophy and contemporary Muslim thought. Beyond Islamic studies, his intellectual interests encompass hermeneutics, phenomenology, and comparative theology. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sayyid Razwan Zamir to the podium to speak about the commemoration phenomenon of Karbala.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you all hear me? All right. Yes. So, let me first explain why I chose the topic I chose. I teach a course called Sunni and Shia Islam at Davidson College. I've taught it 3 times. And almost every time I've taught it, what really stands out for students, and I'm talking about American students, predominantly white American students. I usually get a couple of Muslim students, but most of the students are American, white, coming from Christian background or agnostic background or atheist background. What really stands out, I just finished a week discussing Karbala and the martyrdom of Imam Husain, alayhi salam, in one of my class, the class I'm teaching right now. And almost unanimously, everyone is intrigued by the intensity and passion with which this event is commemorated, which has forced me, it forced me in the past and continues to force me to understand the phenomenon of remembering this event. But not simply that, what does it mean to remember something? So what I'm suggesting here is that there's a question that Karbala and the particular way in which the 12-er Shiite community commemorates it, it forces this question upon us to pay attention to what does it mean to remember, which also means what is memory, and also what to commemorate, why commemorate, and how to commemorate. So the title of my talk, Reliving Karbala, Memory, Remembrance, and Commemoration. Most of the time I'll spend providing some reflections, my personal reflections, there's nothing authoritative about it, on what the phenomenon of memory, human memory, remembrance, and commemoration is, and how does that all apply to the narrative, the event, the story of Karbala, and its particular commemoration that goes on within the Shiite community. So I hope that's clear, that why that topic. So it's not really about Karbala, it's actually, first and foremost, I'm trying to reflect on the phenomenon of memory, remembrance, and commemoration. So let's begin with so I'll break down my talk into the following components. Memory. What is human memory? Human memory is the storage of experiences of the past. It's a repository. Things just exist in our mind or somewhere in our mind. They just exist. But what's more important about this, that they exist passively. There's an element of passivity. If it's only in memory, it's an experience that happened in the past. I'm not really, right now I have a plea that please do not think about Karbala. Because everything I'm saying, if you keep thinking about Karbala and the narrative of Imam Husain, then you may miss my point. I'm saying just think about we have experiences from the past which reside in our mind and they're part of our memory, but they exist passively. There's nothing active about it, but they may surface every now and then. They may surface because something new happened, right? So memory is passive repository of past experience. So that's with memory. And I would like to engage, afterwards, I don't know if we have a question and answer session, if you have any thoughts about this. I have not taken it from somebody, I've just my personal reflection. Then I turn to remembrance. So remembrance, think about this. There's something about, it says re. For one thing, memory, remembrance, and commemoration all have notion of memory in it. It is tied to the notion of memory. Remember meaning revisiting something that has happened in the past. Something that is in the memory, we are going back to it. Right? Remembrance is to revisit what is in the memory, which means then that from passivity, memory being passive, we're moving to something actively engaging a particular memory. It's an active engagement with a particular memory. So it avoids or bypasses or overcomes the passivity that exists in relation to a particular memory. For what reasons? Perhaps to reinforce a memory, to strengthen a memory, to sustain a particular memory, that we are concerned that that particular memory should not be lost. We should not forget that memory. And more importantly, there is consciously or consciously, we are making a choice of putting a particular memory, giving a particular memory more importance over some other memories we have. To remember something, if we are doing it consciously, we have chosen to remember. We have a bag of experience, a bag of memories, but we pick particular things and say, this is the memory that I think is worth remembering. That's an active choice. Is it clear so far, if it's clear? So the element of choice and of activating a particular memory, which means that this memory is more important than other memories. That's why I choose to. Now it can happen there's a particular memory I do not want to remember, but it's thrown at my face. I'm forced to face it. That's a different phenomenon. I'm saying if I choose a particular memory, and think about birthday, people, that's a particular remembering when I was born. There's a choice that goes into this. There are national days commemorated in all countries. So there are particular events in our past which need to be remembered, and we choose them, and eventually what do we do with them? We commemorate them, which means we create an event so we can remember. Commemoration is, if there's not a word in English, but I couldn't find a better one, eventizing a memory. It's creating an event out of it. It's aggrandizement. It's making big something which exists, but now you make it bigger, big enough that you can face it and almost experience it again, that you can revisit your memory through remembrance, and commemoration then is a vehicle for remembrance. And in all of this, I continue to emphasize the notion of active choices being made. This is a conscious process, and has to be a conscious process. All right, so a few conclusions from what I've just said. We commemorate to remember that what we want to be, that what we want to have deeply in our memory. That's what we commemorate. That which we do not want to forget, and that which we may fear that we may forget. All those things are commemorated. So again, and this is all a conscious process. Now, some key questions about these terms regarding memory. Immediately, and especially if the memory, remembrance, and commemoration are clear, I'm slowly moving now how this all applies to the story of Karbala. What does it mean to remember? What's the memory of Karbala, remembering Karbala, and commemorating Karbala? Now, how does this all apply to that particular commemoration, to that particular memory? Key questions. And in some ways, I think the questions I ask are more important for me than the answers I have come up with. And it's, I think, I would hope that there'll be other answers that'll be given by others. So, first question about memory. So why have memory of Karbala? Now, as we know, there are many people who do not have memory of Karbala. I'm talking about if we move outside of the community, meaning it's not part of their experience. The narrative of Karbala is not part of their experience, not part of their past, or they haven't owned it. One can even say Sunni tradition, for example, or certain forms of Sunni Islam It's not part of the memory. So the idea that they will remember it or commemorate it may not arise. But we feel, and I say we here, say the 12-verse Shiite community, the president just spoke and he spoke exactly that. This message needs to be shared, meaning we have to create memory of Karbala outside of our communities, or we have to pass this memory down to our children. So the next generation also has the memory of the same event. So we want to introduce this event to the rest of the community or the larger human community so they also have memory of it, and hopefully they will also remember it and they'll also commemorate it. But the question is not answered yet, that why have the memory of Karbala? And again, because it's a conscious choice, we have to identify what the reasons are. And again, I said for memory, for those who have it, and for others, we have to familiarize them with that past event so they create. So this is a creation of memory. We are involved in that practice, and also we want to remember it. So there is a question of meaning in here, that it's not readily obvious and cannot be readily obvious why remember Karbala. Sometimes we think it is, but it's worth reflecting why we need to have memory of Karbala. So that's one question I'm putting on the table. Then the remembrance and commemoration. Regarding remembrance, so how to remember Karbala? We want to remember it, but then how to remember it? And finally, commemoration, again, which is connected to remembrance because it's a vehicle of remembrance. So there is a relationship between remembrance and commemoration, where we stand on how to remember it would define how commemoration would happen. If it's a sad event, then its practice, its commemoration would have a mourning, the color of mourning. There are certain communities, for example, the Ismaili Shi'i community, for its Husain was victorious that day. So why be sad? So you can commemorate victory, which is, again, related to the question of meaning. What's the meaning that is associated with the event? So familiarizing, the act of familiarizing the outsiders and the memory, why have memory of it? They are connected, and remembrance and commemoration are connected to one another. I hope this much is clear. If this is clear, now I'm moving on to some of the more difficult, I would say, issues, because I think this is the hardest part of the talk. I hope I can express it well. I want to reflect a little bit more about what happens when we remember something. What exactly happens, as a term, phenomenologically, psychologically, I mean in human psyche. What is happening when we are remembering something? Let's start with some very ordinary human experience. We may remember someone we have lost in the past, and we start thinking about that person. And it may happen that as soon as the person comes to the fore, because memory is passive, as I'm remembering that person who say I loved, if I love that person, it may bring a smile on my face. I may cry. And there are certain people in our lives, I think this is also human, we think about them and they're just like, I don't want to think about this person. There's some reaction, emotional reaction, right? So somehow it's interesting, in the act of remembrance, even emotionally, we enter a different space. We go someplace else. It's almost like that which was absent or somewhat absent in my memory has come alive. It's there. To remember is to be there, is to be there within the experience that is in the memory. It is to start experiencing. So if it's a person, in a sense, that person is somewhat there. If it's an event, if we are commemorating Karbala, in some way I'm suggesting, it is almost as if, it's not a remembrance in terms of a past event that I am trying to recall, it's actually I'm trying to be in Karbala. Or Karbala is here. True commemoration would make that movement from present to the past possible. That past comes alive in the present, and I'm there. So remembrance is not really about remembering a past event and thinking about it. It is an act of participation in that memory, in that experience. So therefore, commemorating Karbala has to have that dimension, of which therefore the title of my talk, Reliving Karbala. To remember and commemorate Karbala is to relive it, is to be there. Now, I don't know if that was clear. If you can nod a little bit ahead, I would know that it's clear and I can move on from there. So, in other words, I'm suggesting that Karbala, in the act of remembrance or commemoration, Karbala is not a past event anymore. Karbala is here. Imam Husain is here, and all those people who are being remembered are there. Now, it's interestingly, Shiite community believes that they are there. But we make, say, other kinds of religious arguments, but it's very human. I'm just saying it's just part of, this is just so human. Again, if we leave again Karbala aside or within the Shiite community aside, all traditions know, all religious traditions who have a notion of God, they have a unanimous opinion, remember God. Why? So you don't forget God. So God is in your passive memory, and if you start invoking the divine name, Azkuruni azkurukum, for example, remember me and I will remember you. I will be there. If you are here, I will be there. So the idea, I'm saying it's very universal. There's nothing, it's so human. This phenomenon of remembrance is so human that the distinction between past and present is broken. It's destroyed in the act of remembrance and commemoration. So the past has emerged, or the event from the memory has emerged and come to the present. That's basically the claim. So truly to remember Karbala is to relive it. That's why the title of my talk is. So to remember Karbala is to relive it. So this is about commemoration and remembrance. What goes on there, what happens there in the process of it. But now I want to turn to the first question that I asked. Why have Karbala in the memory? Which is the question of meaning. And we have, I feel almost, I think, what is it that can be said that has not been said in 1300 years? My dissertation I worked on, Maulana Ali Naqi Naqvi, famously known as Nakkan Sahab or Sayyidul Ulama, famous scholar, and he wrote this famous book, Shahid-e-Insaniyat. At the end of the book, he dedicates almost 60 to 80 pages reflecting on what to take from the narrative of Karbala. So I feel very humble to try to give some answers as to why remember, why have memory of Karbala, but I'll do what I can. And also, there are 2-3 things that I want to emphasize and bring everything full circle back to memory. So why have memory of Karbala? And the question that goes with it, why introduce Karbala to the rest? Why introduce Karbala beyond those who have memory of it? What's the significance? Already, Mr. President, when he spoke, I was noting down some of the things he said. He talked about peace, he talked about Islam, he talked about human rights, he talked about freedom. There are people out there who say it is about Islamic governance, that Imam Husain stood up for Islamic governance, Islamic government. That's not my point. We agree or we do not agree. That's really not my issue. I mean, I'm an academic, so I'm not engaged or invested in figuring out exactly. I'm just saying the kinds of responses I hear in avenues, I mean, Muharram Majalis, for example, what is said when people say this is what makes Karbala so important, worth remembering. So I'm just giving you a map of some of the things which are, I think, very commonly stated about that. Some say it's about love, which is also very human. We remember that what we love. There's no way around it. If people love Ahlul Bayt, they have to remember them. But that doesn't answer the question why Karbala in particular has to be remembered, because there are other ways of remembering the Ahlul Bayt which may not involve the matam and the self-flagellation. And as I said, the aggrandizement, it's such a, I'm reminding you again that my students almost always pick on this. This is huge. This is intense. This is extremely passionate. There's something about this practice, there's something about this commemoration which beats every other commemoration. There's something so unique, almost disturbing for them. When they look at it, it's like, we don't understand it. What's happening here? It's the intensity of it, the passion in it, that really stands out for them. So I'm trying to understand how to express that, not just for ourselves, but also for the audience that would not understand it outside. So then you have, so love. Love is another idea. Because we love Imam Husain, therefore that what we love we remember, that's just human. Therefore we need to remember Imam Husain. Some say it's about justice, adl. Some say it's about truth and falsehood, haqq wa batil. Some say, again, Gandhi was quoted early on in the poem, beautiful poem that was shared, empowerment of the oppressed. This is a narrative that tells you, and I think it's all of that. It doesn't have to be this or that, but it's interesting in certain, because the socio-political circumstances, some themes get emphasized more over others. Now, after laying out some of these, I want to emphasize what stands out for me. In my personal reflection, what is it about Karbala? Why have memory of Karbala? First point, I think it's, and this I said is very personal, so I'm not an academic anymore. The principle of sacrifice. It's known as Zibhul Azim. So one's willingness to sacrifice whatever it may be and go all the way in the pursuit of truth and justice. I think that's huge. And why I emphasize it again, there are reasons, because I think sacrifice has gone missing in human communities. Sacrifice is a central theme. And on top of that, what's very intriguing about the narrative of Karbala is that all sacrifices are made with gratitude, not with patience. Constantly being grateful for giving oneself up. I think that's very strange. That is very, very strange and very powerful at the same time. To give oneself, it's not what we have. I have a few pennies or a dollar. It's not about what I have, it's to give oneself up and be grateful for it. Whereas the basic human streak is to preserve oneself. Even like a little hot, like, stove, and I'm like this. This is my basic instinct. But to consciously choose to sacrifice oneself, that's very strange. There's something, I can't come up with a better word. There's something very radical about this. I don't mean radical in the revolutionary sense. I just mean radical. There's something very strange and weird about this. I don't know better words to express it. I hope you understand the phenomena I'm talking about. Words don't matter, but what is it? So I'm saying to give oneself up completely and then posit gratitude, which we make a distinction in Shia communities time and again. Scholars talk about this, that with Ismail alayhi salam, he said, you will find me among the patient ones. But here it's not patience, here is gratitude. Constantly saying, I am grateful. All right, you're cutting my head? Thank God. Alhamdulillah. That's strange. That's very strange. And then what do we do with it? I am asking the question, if we are trying to retain the memory, I am saying, what do we do with this? Can we, if to remember Karbala is to relive it, can we relive it? Can we relive this dimension of Karbala? Not easy. But it has to be on the table. So that's one. Now I come to the second dimension, which again I think is it's hard to express it, but there's something, and it's very much connected to the previous point I made. There's something very strange about what happened at Karbala. It's very disturbing. I'd said the principle of sacrifice, for example. That almost like no matter what sacrifices we make, Karbala makes a mockery of it. Nothing we do is enough. It sort of like stands as this narrative, the story, what Imam Husain does or did, it stands as a mirror in which we can see our sacrifices are nil, nothing. So it's a constant challenge. It stands as a yardstick or criterion, and it challenges all our sacrifices, saying, what is that? That's just 2 cents. Right? And then finally, this is coming full circle now. I end where I began, the question of memory. So on top of everything else that can be said and has been said, 10,000 ways to express why Karbala has to be remembered, why there has to be a memory of Karbala. I think Karbala narrative and our commemoration of it is saying something about memory itself. Now going back to the point I made about that memory formation has to be a conscious process. I try to highlight that in the first half of my talk, that memory, remembrance, commemoration has to be a conscious process. It's an act of choice going back into the bag of experiences we have from our lives and picking certain pieces and saying these matter, and while saying these matter, saying this doesn't matter. So I'm saying that choice to say these are the events, these are the memories that actually matter, but other memories do not matter. So commemoration and remembrance is constantly doing this. It's making certain things more important, and by virtue of that, making other things less important. So eventually coming to our own lives, we need to make conscious choices, I think, about what in our own experiences, what in our own lives matter the most, what is worth engaging, because in the act of remembrance and commemoration, and Karbala is, the commemorating Karbala is a huge example of it. A lot of resources, physical, intellectual, emotional, material resources go into commemorating this. And this is an act of prioritizing this memory over other memories where we are not spending that much money, not spending that much time and energy. So therefore, it's an act of prioritization. So in our own lives, I'm saying, coming back full circle, we need to make a distinction in our own lives. What memories are more important? A conscious choice. What is worth engaging and what is worth not our time? So I'll end here with I hope it's clear, begin with memory. I began with memory and ending with memory. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Zamir, for providing us with your insight on such a powerful topic. It was a very unique perspective. In today's day and age, it has become imperative for us to share the message of the Ahlul Bayt using today's technology to reach out to our generation. Next, we have a short video clip for you from the Who is Husain campaign.
Husain is adorned with the title, the father of the free man.
And Husain's ethos was about establishing freedom.
He was faced with tyranny and injustice, and he had a choice to make. He could have walked away with his life intact and his family, but he decided to make a stand, a selfless stand.
Here was Husain with only 72 followers, facing an army of 30,000. A normal person would want to back down from something like that. But Husain maintained his ground.
Husain recognizes that for the religion to remain alive, for godly principles to remain alive, for morality to remain alive, for ethics to remain alive, he has to sacrifice his own.
For someone to give such a sacrifice, they must have full faith in that which they are doing and faith in that which they believe in.
And so today, the name of Imam Husain continues to be held up as a flag of human equality and dignity. And those people who are standing up for these causes, remember the name of Imam Husain.
We can learn from Husain. We can learn from Husain in the fact that we have to maintain our determination with whatever goals that we set.
Hussein demonstrated to all of us the value of not just having faith from the tongue, not just from the heart, but embodying the action of faith in everything that you have.
And for millions across the world today, Hussein stands as the exemplary individuals and the role model in seeking to establish freedom, dignity, honor, and the right for self-expression.
I hope you all take the opportunity to take a look outside as we have some valuable resources for you to purchase. This book, Journey to Eternity, is brought to you by Taqwa Media. It's complimentary today. And another book we have for you is The Unique Sacrifice of Imam Husain for Humanity, which is published by Payam-e-Aman and written by Dr. Manzoor Rizvi. I would like to invite Dr. Farooq Bandali to tell us a little bit about Taqwa Media today. Salawat.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I start, I wanted to thank Payam-e-Aman and Stand with Dignity for the opportunity to be here. My name is Farooq, and I am the co-founder of an organization called Taqwa Media. Some of you may have heard of it, and some of you may have not. Our mission is to share the message of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam across the globe using state-of-the-art technologies. We are a publisher and distributor of Islamic content. Our aim is to promote learning through methodologies that are not found either through the University of the Ahlul Bayt at majlises, or in the school systems, or at madrasas. We are here to supplement the learning of Islam. We wanted to feature a few products this Muharram. And given that today is the day of, we're commemorating Imam Husain Day, the first of the books that I wanted to share with you is a book that is titled From Medina to Karbala in the Words of Imam al-Husain. So allow me to ask a few questions. Have you wondered, what did Imam al-Husain say to Walid ibn Utbah and Marwan al-Hakam on the day when he was approached by them? Before Imam Husain left from Medina, what were his words at the shrine of our Holy Prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What was his last will and testament that he gave to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya? When he was traveling from Medina to Mecca, what were the letters that he wrote? At Mecca, what were some of the events that transpired in his words? That, the entire route that he took, and much more, is provided in a book like this, that is initially authored by Ayatollah Muhammad Sadiq Najmi, and then translated by Dr. Muhammad Reza Fakhr Rouhani. It is content that we don't normally see in a very short amount of time during majalises. And it is now available to us. And one of our visions is not only to get it to our communities, but to get it to every last library in North America. There's a second book that I wanted to speak about, and that is called God's Emissaries, From Adam to Jesus. The author of this book, his name is Rizwan Arastu, Sheikh Rizwan Arastu. You may have heard of him from his numerous other publications, including the Al-Kafi series. Let me describe this book briefly. So over a span of 3 years, these are his qualifications. He's a Princeton graduate, and then went to Qom, spent 8 years, and has been here now for the last 10 years doing Islamic research and scholarship. Over the last 3 years, he spent time looking at every last Quranic verse of 26 prophets in the Quran, starting from Adam. He then looked at Bihar Anwar and the hadith from Bihar Anwar about these prophets. He undertook archaeologic study, as well as astrologic study, looked at Egyptology, looked at a comparison from the Bible, and compiled an entire book that's 600 pages long in a narrative, such that my 12-year-old son is now picking up this book and able to read. We in Hollywood see movies like Prophet Nuh, and there is a movie recently out there. They depict the prophets as people that make mistakes, as humans. In reality, they don't depict the prophets as they truly are. And this is the first of the attempt. It's a comprehensive collection of these stories that are told in a story-like format, whether you are 12 years old or whether you are 80. You can pick up this book and gain your appreciation on the entire prophethood. Last year I had the opportunity to be here, and I had spoken about Al-Kafi Book 1. Al-Kafi Book 2 is now out. It is titled Book of Knowledge and Its Merits. And it gives you the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam with the commentary. Not only are we focusing in on adults, but one of our greatest focuses, and we recognize this, that learning starts at a very young age. So we have a brand called Taqwa Kids. And what we're trying to do is get into every last school system and madrasa in North America. We have content that is out there to edutain children. What do I mean? Provide very high quality educational content that attracts children towards this information. Currently, we are seeing a lot of children spending time on computers, medias, games. We are looking to replace that with very high quality content. So for example, content like this, that's character based. Ilyas and Duck in Search of Allah. I won't go into the details of this book. Suffice it to say that using characters, we are now able to teach children belief system. This book helps a child as early as 3 years old ask the question, where is Allah? And answers the question by saying Allah is everywhere. When I read this book to my child, after two readings, you would ask him, Ahmad, where is Allah? He would say, Allah is everywhere. I was then able to use that critical thinking during his behavior on any given day and say, Ahmad, we don't want to do this because Allah is watching. Character-based content. We have content like this, called Thirst Sakina, where orphans have depicted the story of Janab Sakina alayhi salam, with the idea of having these purchases available, but to try and benefit that community as well. So proceeds from books like this, as well as books like Alif Bata of Karbala, that depicts the entire story, that depicts the story of Karbala using the Arabic letters, where our children during Muharram can not only learn the story of Karbala, but also learn to write Arabic. And it is this sort of content that we are trying to get, so we need your help. We are outside. Those that may be teachers, we're trying to get this into your madrasas. Those that are individual parents that want to engage your children, come and purchase these books from us. Those that have expertise in media and marketing, so on and so forth. So I wanted to take a minute to thank the organizers once again for the opportunity to be here and to be able to speak to you about some of this content. And we are outside right on here on the right. Please come and talk to us. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Farooq. I really encourage you all to take a look outside and take a look at some of his books. After the program, yes. Our next speaker, Dr. Diane D'Souza, is the Director of Continuing Education and the Mission Institute of the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She is widely published in the fields of gender, religion, interreligious dialogue, and peace building. Dr. D'Souza lived and worked in India for nearly 20 years, where she taught Islam and Christian-Muslim relations and conducted research on Muslim women's religious practices. She is the author of Partners of Zainab, a gendered perspective on Shia Muslim faith, and Shia Women, Muslim Faith and Practice. She earned her doctorate in religious studies in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Diane D'Souza to speak about the passion of Lady Zainab, an inspiration for women, with the loudest of your salawat.
Thank you, Zara. I am very grateful to be here, very honored and humbled to be here. I wanted to start by thanking the Husain Day Committee for all the members, the Payani Imam, and especially Dr. Manzur Rizvi, Zain and Fatima Rizvi, and our president as well. I also want to dedicate my talk to courageous people everywhere, of whom we all know the Ahl al-Bayt are our fine example. My story that I will be sharing with you today, my talk today, I come here because of a path that I've walked, and Zahra referred a little bit to that. I met and married an Indian Christian man in Canada and traveled to India with our young son and had 2 more children there who we raised in India. And it was my good fortune to work at a Christian dialogue center dedicated to Christian-Muslim dialogue and friendship. So in the course of living in Hyderabad for so many years, I was fortunate to be able to meet and get to know many Muslim families, the Muslim community broadly, and Shia as well as Sunni communities. So my story and all that I can share today comes because of the great hospitality that I experienced from the Shia community in Hyderabad and for the wider Muslim community there. So anything I have to say that is good comes from these my teachers who are there, and anything that I say that perhaps you don't agree with is my own limitation or lack of understanding. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about Lady Zainab, and I want to focus particularly on her life during the days of Karbala and after. You all know, of course, that Lady Zainab's story is much longer than that period. You know that she is someone of many gifts. She had the gift of being educated at the feet of her father, Imam Ali. She had the gift of a quick and lively mind, and she had the gift of great love for her brothers, for her family. Those were all gifts that formed her. But I want to focus today on Karbala and the 2 stories that are there. The story of the rising of Imam Husain and the story of the rising and continuation of Lady Zainab. Where Husain left off, Zainab continued. Some called her the partner of Husain, Sharik. She was partner because she was companion, she was confidant of Husain, she was caretaker to him. We know that each of the martyrs who went out that day onto the plains of Karbala went out from her tent. They came into her tent, the blessings were received, and they set off. And we know that when Imam Husain breathed his last, that it was she who offered the shahadat. offering his life as a gift before God. All that is true, and as Zainab continued, it was her courage that I really want to focus on. Because Imam Husain was very clear that women cannot fight on the battlefield. You may remember Wahab bint Abdullah, who wanted to stand beside her husband on the battlefield. She said, I will die next to him. And Imam Husain said, no, that is not for you. You know, of course, the story continued and she ended up dying there next to her husband, but not fighting. So if women cannot die on the battlefield, if they cannot be a martyr, does that mean they don't have any bravery? They have nothing here to offer? No. Sometimes in focusing on the bravery and courage of the martyrs, we forget that there is bravery continuing on. We forget the role of witnessing to the truth. Witnessing to the truth. Now, witnessing to the truth is different from witnessing. So if I see a car accident happen on the road, I am a witness. But I am a passive witness. I simply see something. That's different from witnessing to the truth. To witness to the truth is an act. You take steps to do something. And that is what Lady Zainab did. She witnessed to the truth in the fields of Karbala itself, when all the martyrs were gone and the army came to her tents. She witnessed to the truth on the roads, through the towns and the villages, on the way to Kufa and Damascus. She witnessed to the truth in Medina upon her return after so much that had taken place. But particularly she witnessed in the courts of the powerful in Kufa and Damascus. Witnessing to the truth is speaking truth to power. Speaking truth to power. And I want to just give you a sense of what that speaking truth to power entails. I'm going to draw a little bit from my book, Partners of Zainab. But the portion that I'm drawing from is much, much older, of course. It is coming from the history of Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari. So al-Tabari's wonderful history of what actually happened. So I want to take up the story where, as you remember, Zainab and the women and the fourth Imam, Imam Zain al-Abidin, had come into the courts at Kufa. And they had been marched. They had just endured the horrific experience of Karbala. And when they come in before the governor notices someone. He notices Zainab. And he says, "Who is that? Who are you?" And Lady Zainab doesn't speak. And again, the person holding the power in the room says, "Who are you?" And again, she doesn't speak. And the question comes again and again, until finally her maidservant, so frightened, says, "This is Zainab, daughter of Fatima." And thus starts a conversation between Lady Zainab and Ubadallah. So Ubadallah says to her, "Praise be to God who has disgraced you, killed you, and revealed the false nature of your claims." Zainab replies, "Praise be to God who has favored us with Muhammad and has purified us completely from sin. It is not as you say, for he only disgraces the great sinner and reveals the false nature of the profligate." He asked, "How do you consider God treated your family?" How do you consider God treated your family? And she replied, God decreed death for them, and they went forward to their resting place. God will gather you and us together. You will plead your excuses, and we will be your adversaries before him. Now imagine that you are doing this, not just, here in this gathering or among people you don't like. Imagine you're doing this, let's just say, for example, in the White House before the president and all the Congress. I don't know, try and think of what it means to stand in the court of a ruler and say these things. And Zainab comes back, and she said, she already came back and said, we will be your adversaries before God. And her retort made the governor so enraged that he burned with anger until a courtier had to say, may God make the governor prosperous. She's only a woman. Are women responsible for anything they say? Do not hold her responsible or blame her for her foolish talk. And Ibn Ziyad said to her, God has healed my soul from your tyrant and the rebellious, disobedient members of your family. And Zainab wept and then said, by my life, you have killed the mature of my family. You have ruined my family. You have cut down my young branches. You have pulled out the root. If this satisfies you, then you have your fill. Ubadallah declared, by my life, this is real bravery. Your father was a brave poet. And Zainab answered, what has a woman to do with bravery? Indeed, I have things to distract me from bravery. Bravery is not just courage on a battlefield. It's not just death for a cause. It's not just martyrdom before one's enemies. Bravery is also confronting those who seek to harm or perpetrate injustice. Bravery is speaking truth to power. And speaking truth to power, that's an action descriptive of the prophets. They spoke truth to power. It's an attribute of God. And it's crucially important to know that in this case, speaking up was not only about confronting, but speaking up was how the story became known. So just think, if the women weren't there at Karbala, what would have happened? How would we have known the story? How would the story have gone out? Not only did it go out on the roads to Kufa and Damascus, not only did it go out in the courts because of the brave speaking, it went out through remembrance, through mourning, through the women coming to know and telling their families. In fact, Zainab was such a powerful orator that the Umayyad rulers were frightened of her. They called her inflammatory. They saw her as such an eloquent, clever, intelligent woman that they finally had to exile her many years later. Speaking truth to power, witnessing to the truth, confronting, spreading the word. But there's something else in what Lady Zainab said in those courts for the governor in Kufa. She said, what does a woman have to do with bravery? I have things to distract me from bravery. Now, what did Zainab mean when she said that? Was she being ironic? She's very quick and clever, right? So was she being ironic because the courtier had just before assured the governor, oh, it's just foolish talk, it's just a woman. So was it that kind of sharp reminder of that? Or was it that, having just witnessed Husain and the other 72's great sacrifice, that she could not begin to compare what she saw with what she was doing. We won't know, but we can think about it. But one thing we do know, when she said, "There's much to distract me from bravery," she was speaking the truth there too. Because unlike the martyrs whose lives ended on that battlefield, Zainab had to pick up the pieces and carry on. Not just proclaiming what had happened, but protecting those who were dependent on her and solving the daily problems of how to get people to stay alive and to get free. Yes, there was much to distract her. You remember how she protected Zain al-Abidin on the tents at Karbala itself when his very life was threatened, marching with the shackles on his wrists and ankles, with the great heat, and how it's told that the shadow of Zainab protected him. In the Kufan courts, because it wasn't only Zainab, of course, who spoke out. The fourth Imam spoke out with great truth and courage as well in those courts. But when he did, the governor was so enraged by what he said that he threatened to kill him. And at that moment, Zainab flew to his side and said, "If you kill him, you have to kill me too." And the fierceness in her eyes, I believe, told the governor that she was speaking the truth. And he didn't have the courage to kill either of them. You remember, of course, Zainab protecting Fatima, the daughter of Husain, in Yazid's court. As this band of survivors comes finally to the caliph's court, as they enter, one of the courtiers, a Syrian, says, "Look at her, Fatima. I want her as my wife." And he's speaking to the caliph. Zainab again, and you have to, I think for me, you have to really put yourself in that position. This isn't just thinking on your feet. This is thinking on your feet after enduring the most awful, awful experience you could ever imagine for yourself or your family. So when the Syrian asks Yazid, "Give me her," Zainab again steps forward and she says to the Syrian, "By God, you are a liar. By God, you are too lowly born. Such a thing is not for you and not for him." Yazid. Yazid cried out, angry, "By God, you are a liar. That is for me. If I wish to do it, I can do it." And Zainab retorted, "No, by God. God would only let you do that if you left our faith and professed belief in another religion." Yazid screamed, distraught with anger, "Dare you face me in this way? It is your father who has left the religion, and your brother." And Zainab replied, "Quick! You, your father and your grandfather have been guided by the religion of God, by the religion of my father, the religion of my brother and my grandfather." He shouted, "Enemy of God, you lie." And she answered, "You, a commander who has authority, are vilifying unjustly and oppress with your authority." And then Al-Tabari writes, "By God, it was as if he were ashamed, and he became silent." And the Syrian repeated, "Commander of the faithful, give me that girl." And Yazid said to him, "Go away. May God strike you dead." The courage of Zainab, the courage to stand up and say no, the courage to fight for the people that were depending on her, to offer her life. That's bravery. And finally, when Yazid said, "Okay, you can go. Take all your people and go," what did Zainab say? No. I'm not going to go until you give me the heads. Until I'm able to stop at Karbala and bury those heads and honor those martyrs. You want to allow me to go? I will not go. And she got what she wanted from that man. So the story of Karbala is not just the story of battlefield warriors. It's the story of courage and action, witnessing to the truth, and it's the story of carrying on, protecting those who are still alive. Karbala is the story of tragedy and bravery, with women and men standing together, two sides of the same coin, a portrait of courage. And you know, Shia faith, it prepares women for that. It prepares courageous women to witness to the truth, and courageous men. When I began my research on Shia practices of devotion, looking at women's practices in Hyderabad, I was telling a Sunni professor who was teaching at Osmania University about my work that I was just beginning, and he said, "You won't find women's leadership. It's not there. You're not going to find it." And I said, "No, I am, and I found some," and I started to tell him, and he said, "Oh, you're talking about Shia women. Oh, that's different." You have a gift in your stories. Why to remember, you ask? You have a gift in your stories, and you know what? We are living in a world which requires much courage. We need people who can speak truth to power. Yes, to tell the stories of the past, but yes, to live in today's world and to speak courageously. We have people who are migrants to this country who are facing injustice. We need to speak out courageously. We have people imprisoned in this country. We need to speak out courageously. We have homeless people on our streets, and we call ourselves the most advanced country in the world. We need to.
Time of Arba'i. This is the magic of this man. And to get to know him, and we have had beautiful presentations before me, to allow me to transport you back the year 680, Christian era, on the hot desert sands of Karbala. Picture, if you will, a society that once again is steeped in tyranny, cruelty, and oppression. And this was just 50 years after the death. I apologize for this interruption, I should have switched it off. Just 50 years after the death of the Blessed Prophet Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who had actually brought these very things to an end, were recurring again in this society. Once again, injustice was rampant at the social level, suppression at the political level, racism raising its ugly head in society. In the midst of this tyranny, we heard about the bravery of men and women in Karbala, that in the midst of this tyranny, he fearlessly speaks against the ruler of the time, demanding justice, liberty, and freedom. This is the legacy. He refuses the bay'ah. He refuses the oath of allegiance. And when we look at the bay'ah, normally it is understood that Imam refused to give bay'ah to Yazid. It was slightly different. Imam framed it a little differently, and this is the meaning of an enduring legacy when he said, "Mithlu la yubayu mithlahu," meaning that the like of me cannot give bay'ah to the like of him. He universalized this concept of not giving bay'ah to anyone by anybody who is an oppressor to the oppressed. So he said, my example, who is utterly submissive to Allah, cannot give his hand to the like of him who is an open sinner. So this is very important for us to understand. It was not just one man refusing the bay'ah of another. It was a concept refusing the bay'ah of a concept. It was a distinction between truth and falsehood. It was a distinction between what was evil and what was good. And that is why this is an enduring legacy of righteousness that we cannot be mindful of. So premise one was by Imam, I am the manifestation of the truth. Yazid is the manifestation of falsehood. A manifestation of truth cannot unite with the manifestation of falsehood. The conclusion is, I cannot agree to pay my oath of allegiance to him. Having set the scene thus, on that sand dune in Karbala, on that day, at the time which was the most difficult time, the time of Asr Ashur, on a sand dune, bleeding, wounded, he looks at the sky. He seems to draw a strength from some unknown source. And like a muazzin, he calls out, Hal min nasirin yansurna. He did not say this just one time, it is said. He turns in 4 different directions and repeats the call. Who was he calling out to? He made sure that that call reverberated in all directions. Why? I put it to you, Mu'mineen, this was a call to Muslims of every generation, of every land, to say, Hal min nasirin yansur. So, as Josh said, that तारीख दे रही है ये आवाज़ दम बदम, दश्त से सब तो अज़्म है, दश्त से बाला व गम. सब्र मसीह और जुर्रत सुकरात की कसम, इस राह में है सिर्फ एक इंसान का कदम, जिसकी रगों में आतिश बद्र हुनैन है, जिस रगों में आतिश बद्र हुनैन है, उस सूरमा का इसमें गिरामी हुसैन है. That is the Husain that we are talking about. That history is making a repeated clarion call. It is in the wilderness of the relentlessness of war and Gaul, by the fortitude of Christ, by Socrates' valor. This path is trodden alone by a man of honor. The man tempered his veins with the fire of Badr and Hunain. He is a valiant being. His sweet name is Husain. So what does he do when he leaves Medina? He says, وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ إِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّتِي جَدِّي. That I am leaving the home, the city of my grandfather, for the islah of the ummah of my grandfather. It was not to fight Yazid or to get a throne. It was to rekindle the Islamic conscience which was nearing extinction by the conduct of Muawiyah and Yazid. This was his mission. So Karbala for us is a microcosm of great lessons in Islamic principles. We heard some of those before. The highest ideals of Huququllah, the way the prayers were given importance, the manner in which the rights of Allah upon human beings were demonstrated in Karbala. This was the epitome to say to pray in those circumstances. This is a manifestation of Huququllah. At the same time, the caring principles of Huququl Ibad. Karbala is about caring. Karbala is about the rights of others upon us. And it is the balance of these two wings of Huququllah and Huququl Ibad that Karbala teaches us. Bibi Zainab Salamullahi alayha, as we heard, was with that bravery was able to give not just hukukullah, but also hukukul ibad in terms of making sure that the children and the family were protected, to say that she gave that, all that she had. I mean, this is what Karbala is about. Every revolution has blood, and it has the message. The men gave their blood, and as we heard, the women took the message forward, so that this was also hukukul ibad, because had it not been for Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha, we would not have received that message in the way that we have. And this is Karbala. There are many ways of framing something, and it's Karbala that frames this story. You know, there was a blind boy standing outside the street, and he said, "I'm blind, help me." And he could not hear many coins being tossed in the box. Suddenly somebody passes by and turns and writes something on the board. And what he sees is many more coins going into that box. What made the change? The message was reframed to say that today is a beautiful day, I cannot see and you can see. It changed. It reframed. Karbala is about compassion. Karbala is about giving. Karbala is not about taking. Karbala teaches us to say, and as we heard to say, it was a level of gratitude. Giving with gratitude, it is unimaginable as to how one can say that I sacrifice and yet there is gratitude, as we heard. These are the lessons that we learn from Karbala. So at a personal level, this ritual of Azaa connects us through that bodily participation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Azaa, the matam that we have, it connects us. It connects us. And Lord, let nobody tell you this, misguide you. The alam and the shabi and all the sha'irullah that we have, they connect us with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There happen to be those within this very community, the Shia community, especially in North America, who are trying to drive us away from the rituals, the rich rituals of the alam, the shabi, the jula. Everything that we hold dear is being slowly eroded in the name of Tawheed. Is there anything better than Tawheed to try and understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Sha'irullah? That we go to the Kaaba is Sha'irullah. The alam that we have, the alam is Sha'irullah. So let us not be misguided. Let us raise our children respecting the tabut, respecting the alam, respecting the heritage that we have. Yes, this heritage did not come. This heritage did not come from Persia, or it did not come from Saudi Arabia. It actually originated, as the historian said, Mohsin Bhai is here, he'll bear me out, to say that these were enacted at the time of Timur. And this is something that historically continues with the people of the subcontinent. As long as we understand that these are Sha'irullah, that this is a wasila that we use of the Aimma alayhimus salam, we should not be misguided. And I urge my young friends to truly think that in the name of being progressive, in the name of thinking critically, do think critically. And this is how I invite you to think critically. And then it is a timeless ritual. These, as we say, are meta-historical rites. This was very elucidly described by the previous speaker, Dr. Rizwan. Thank you for that really wonderful talk. That these are actually meta-historical, that we live them. That these are beyond the confines of real time, because they allow us to continue and to connect physically and emotionally through these ritual acts of devotion that we have. This is the Azaa. This is the enduring legacy. And if we raise the next generation to that level, to understand and imbibe this spirit, it seems to be eroding sometimes within the next generation. This spirit needs to be maintained of Azaa. Shaykh Ustad Mutahari said something very beautiful. He said, You don't have to think about 4 generations. You just have to, it reminds me of a little anecdote. That a man goes to see the Joshi, you know where Joshi is, right? A soothsayer. A soothsayer. Somebody who tells you your future. And he comes back home, he's not a very happy man. So the Joshi said, what happened? The wife said, what happened? Why are you unhappy today? He said, well, I went to this soothsayer and he gave me some bad news. He said, what's the bad news? Well, he said that you will amass enough wealth that is going to last you 6 generations. So the good lady wife says, well, that must be a good thing. That's good news that you have so much wealth that 6 generations will be able to benefit from it. He said, I'm worried about the 7th. We don't have to worry about 6 generations. Shaykh Ustad Mutari said, you just nurture the next generation, imbibed in the spirit, so that you can move on to the next generation. So now, let us look at the value, because this is a meta-historical act. Our entire body actually is present in Karbala. It is present. And it is manifested through the tears that drop on our cheeks when we hear Karbala. Well, again, Mutari says that if a tear that we shed for him should signify harmony between our souls and the spirit of Abba Abdullah, it represents a brief flight. Imagine, Mu'mineen, imagine what we are getting. Mutahari said it's a brief flight. It's a spiritual flight that goes along with Husain's spirit. Can we understand the power of this flight of spirituality? The idea of soaring with the spirit of Abba Abdullah. That tear, that is the value of that tear. I was trying to find for many years a simple explanation that I could understand with my simple mind of spirituality. It was difficult. And then I met a Hindu Pandit. And the Pandit gave me a little tip, which really my simple mind understood it immediately. You know what he said? That when you're walking on the road and you have a mother carrying an infant in a pram, and you look at the infant and you smile at the infant, which is what you would normally do. This is human emotion. And this infant smiles back at you. There is an electric spark that happens to every one of us when you have that innocent smile coming back to you as a reaction of your smile. And he said, you feel good. Internally, you feel good about it. Well, he said, that's spirituality. That's a hint of spirituality. Imagine if you could be in that state for 5 minutes. If you could be in that state for 10 minutes. If you could be in that state for half an hour. Tell me, where would you be that if you have that spark, that small spark of a few seconds of feeling good, if you could maintain that over a period of time, that's spirituality. And this tear that rolls down our cheek is that flight with Abba Abdullah Imam Husain alayhi salam. But at the same time, Mu'mineen, and this is where I talk about us moving into the discomfort zone. And that same tear is a prescription for reform. It's not an empty tear. It's a spiritual flight.
With courage to speak truth to power. We have an earth which needs our protection. We need to speak out. We need to be witnesses to the truth. And what wonderful examples you have. We all have here in these stories. And I just want to say one last word about stories. When I started doing my research in Hyderabad, I found many lively stories and practices among people like you, among the women with whom I spent a lot of time. And as I tried to gain more information, I would often go to books. And sometimes I found information in those books, and a lot of time I did not. For instance, for those who want to study Islam in English, a classic is the Encyclopedia of Islam, many volumes. One of the places you start, kind of the Wikipedia of Islamic studies. And do you know that there is no entry for Lady Zainab? How is that possible? When we look at the classic book in English on the early origins and spread of Shia Islam by S.H.M. Jaffrey, wonderful scholar, wonderful work, he mentions Zainab once. Why is that? She was there. She was important. It's in the history. We only have to go and read it. Why to leave women out? And part of the reason I wrote this book was because I believe that the stories of women deserve more attention. To listen to the perspectives from which women were speaking deserves more attention. To hear what they saw, how they acted. But also, the stories I heard were alive and well in the community. When you gather, when you commemorate, what you're doing is continuing to keep the stories alive. And yes, the media, new media devices, I was telling someone before, when I first started my research, there were no majlis on the internet. Can you believe that? What would we do without majlis on the internet today? But that was the time. Yes, many new resources are there, they're wonderful, but we have to remember that the stories live here. The stories are living, and we need to uphold those, because that is what fed me and led me, was the stories I heard from women and men in gatherings like this. So we need these stories. We need inspiration. We need the courage, the bravery, the passion of Lady Zainab. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. D'Souza, for so generously giving us your time today to speak about a woman who is an exemplary role model for all of us. I hope we can all be inflammatory like Bibi Zainab, men and women alike, inshallah.